Travel and Things presents In Conversation With. I'm your host, David Batsoffen, and today I'm very glad to welcome to In Conversation With Ian Laxton, well-known sports broadcaster, and now author. The book is called The Final Lap, and it's published by Guidebook Publications. That's Tom Cottrell, another name well-known in running circles. Ian, good morning. Welcome to you.
Thank you, David. Thanks for having me.
So The Final Lap is winning enough. At our age, this seems to be the general consensus. This is the final 400 for all of us of this particular age. But that's not what this book is about.
No, it's not. It's about a race or a runner in a race and the world of high-level track athletics, which is very, very interesting and exciting. So
there are, what, 5 major characters in your book. Obviously, the star of the book is Abby Dennison, and I have the book in front of me, so I'm actually cribbing off the back. Abby Dennison, who is a world-class track runner. There's obviously the race, which is put together by James Self, who's an ambitious athletics meeting director. There is a journalist, Dion Coetzee, and a fan. The fan is the guy that interests me, but we'll get to Mark White in a moment. And then the opposition that comes from a variety of different places that the reader definitely does not expect. So let's go back to Abby. Why did you pick this particular race and this particular distance?
David, I think we need to stress, first of all, that this is a South African story, although quite a lot of it happens overseas, right, because that's where big track happens. It's a South African story, and Abby is a kind of an amalgam, if you like, of a number of world-class women track athletes that I've dealt with. I understand women track athletes perhaps a little better than men, and I positioned her as a 1,500-meter runner because that is linked to the magic of the mile, which is a very strong part of the background to this book. So Abby is a South African woman with a very interesting history. She had a childhood tragedy that changed her life and motivated her to become #1 in the world, where she is at the start of the book. So that's really where she comes from. It's a wonderful athlete, a once-in-a-generation athlete, a kind of a Zola Bud, Usain Bolt type of person.
So you mean if Zola and Hussein had a child, Abby would have been that? Sort of.
Yes, I guess.
Loosely.
That's an interesting comparison. Never really thought of that.
Now, the mile has been broken 1,664 times, the 4-minute mile, but never by a woman. Now, I know the 1,500 meters, there's still, 160 meters to go between 1,500 and a mile. But does that 160 meters make that much difference to female athletes that they are unable to break that magic number?
The simple answer is yes, it is, because that 109 meters, actually, it's 1,609 meters,
yeah,
is worth about 15 or 16 seconds. And the beauty of the story, and it's based on absolute facts, is that the current world record for the women's 1,500 meters is around about 3 minutes 50. So if you add, call it 16 seconds for that extra 109 meters, it takes it to about 4 minutes and 6.
Okay.
So there's a magic 6 seconds that's kind of missing. And that is a little bit unreachable, certainly now. But equally relevant is the fact that the world record for the women's mile, as it stands now, if you go into Google, is around about 4 minutes and 12 seconds.
Correct.
So it is, in a way, kind of 6 seconds slower, if you like, than it should be. And that's the whole basis for the story, because this James Self guy sets up this meeting in London. He goes, well, the women's world record is on the slowish side, so let's set up a thing to break it. Not necessarily get to 4 minutes, because that's impossible, but break the world record. And he builds this whole story around this attempt on the record and kind of emulate, if you like, the Roger Bannister 4-minute mile sort of epic achievement. That's right. The idea behind this.
Now, the Bannister 4-minute, he came in just under 4 minutes, 3:59.4. But the timing in those days was handheld stopwatches. So can you factor in, I mean, I don't want to take anything away from Roger's feat, but can you take into consideration the method of timing used, or were there enough stopwatches clicked to take an average type of thing, rather than the digital that they're using now with the electronic?
Well, absolutely, but certainly that is true. And I'll respond to that in a little bit of depth and to explain the whole background. In 1954, it was a different world they run in. So yes, they had handheld stopwatches, but if you look at the picture of that, the video of it, there are about 10 guys standing on there with watches. So they had plenty of watches to look at. But having said that, he ran on a gravel track in the middle of the boondocks of Oxford, and the old track shoes they ran in. So whereas on one hand, maybe he got a little bit out, possibly unlikely on the stopwatches, boy, did he have disadvantages with shoes and training methods and track surface, which is hugely important compared with now. So right now, I reckon if Roger had run, he probably would have done about 3:57.
How important, now that you mentioned the actual tracks, those people who watch track sport and who've never run it or never stepped on one of those tracks, how important is the track surface for elite international athletes?
Massive. It's huge. You know, I mean, I saw my first tartan track way back in 1970. And that was at Portage Stadium. It was the first one in South Africa. And it was like a legendary breakthrough, because prior to that, and even a lot of the tracks now, and certainly around the world, they run on very hard gravel, which is pretty good, but it doesn't have that smoothness and the bounciness, if you like, of a tartan track. And never anywhere in the world is a major track meeting held on gravel anymore. They're all on tartan.
Right. Now, we've discussed before, when I saw you at the book launch, the loneliness of the long distance runner, because now my colors to the mast. The last time you and I saw each other was the top of Polly Shorts. You wanted to do an interview and I was battling to get to the finish of Comrades that year. So it wasn't a good day for either of us. I think rude words were exchanged, but in the nicest possible way. So there is the loneliness of the long distance runner. But what about the loneliness of the elite track athlete, Ian?
I think, you know what, you've asked me that question before and I've thought about it, and it really is relevant. You know, the loneliness of the long distance runner is the sort of the famous thing about the guy out training on his own for a marathon, and he's in the woods and he's all by himself. But I think it also is relevant to the distance track runner, because it is a lonely life in a way. I mean, if you follow Abby's life, she's going around the world. Sure, she's got a dad and a trainer and whatever with her, but she's not at home. She has in and out of hotels and aeroplanes and new places and time zones and whatever. And when she's training, sure, the coach is there, but she's out alone. And in the track, I think it's important to understand that if you're in a rugby match or a soccer match, you've got your guys around you, your mates, but on the track, you're alone. And I think the loneliness of the middle distance runner is something that we need to think about. And it's true. It is true.
Now, the 1500 meters is what, 4 times around a 400 meter track. How do you as an athlete, and I know that both your wife and your daughter run, both Sonia and Kim are track athletes. How do they keep time? I know the last lap is signaled by a bell, but what about the others? Do you play games, or is there no time to play games in your head? It's just head down and wait for the bell, and then you know it's the last round type of thing.
Well, let me get into that a little bit. Excuse me. There are 2 types of international elite track races, middle distance races. They are the championship races like the Olympics. Sorry, David. Where it's all about winning and podium places. And then there are the races set up, like in my book, specifically to break records. And they run differently. In a championship, there's no designated pacemaker. They just get out there in the final and somebody might take the lead or not. But in a record attempt, which you see very often these days, they have somebody that goes out and sets the pace. And there's so much going through your head as an athlete, and it's all about experience. And a lot of the thinking is intuitive. It's not really planned. You've got a race plan, and you'll read about that in the book. But a lot of the split-second decisions are intuitive, and you will have a glance at the clock as you go past. But really, it's almost intuitive. You follow the pacemaker, you trust the pacemaker. And then, as you say, everything happens in the final lap. When the bell goes, that's when all hell breaks loose in terms of tactics and strength and power and speed.
Now, when it comes to pacemakers, I've always wondered about that. Do they do rock, paper, scissors in the warm-up area? And then some poor sod gets designated as the pacemaker and then has to step off the track 3/4 of the way through the race and not go for the win. Or conversely, do pacemakers get paid to pacemake so they know at least they've got an income for that particular race?
Do you know what, David? It all depends on the race. The simple answer is there's no rock, paper. There's a designated person. The person comes into the race. Mm-hmm. They are specifically assigned the job of making the pace when they're going for a record, like in my story. And they are pretty skilled at that. You know, these people in top level athletics have been doing it for years and years and years, and they're extremely good at what they do. And in the track, a pacemaker goes out and usually runs two laps. It varies from race to race, but in my race, it was 2 laps, going at a certain speed, and they're very good at judging speed. Plus, they are the ones that look at the clocks on the side of the road, on the side of the track, to just see how they're doing. So it is definitely a paid thing, yes, usually, and they are skilled and they are rewarded accordingly. And when you watch a big London marathon, for example, those guys are pacemakers. Renee Kalmer, for example, the local South African lass who's world class, she's done pacemaking. And heaven help you if you're more than a minute out in a marathon. So yes, it's a very skilled thing.
Now let's get to this fan. Let's get to Mark White. Firstly, has anybody called Mark White and spelt the way you've spelt it in your book contacted you and go, you know, I'm really a nice person, and now you've turned me into this, let's put it nicely because we don't want to give too much away, into this fan, and I'm going to put fan in inverted commas. So I'm a little bit upset. Or has nobody contacted you? Or conversely, Mark has contacted you and said, spot on, how did you know I was actually like that?
The simple answer, obviously, David, is no, because choosing the names of people in books is actually quite difficult, because you've got to, you know, if I said the bad guy is called David Batsoffen, then you'd really get upset. But Mark White is a kind of a generic name. But moving on from that, I think this book is far more, and I've certainly designed it to be far more than just, you know, a story about a track race and an athlete. It is about the lifestyle and the risks that athletes take. The known risks like injuries and bad form and bad tactics, those are known risks of any sport for that matter. But I think specifically here, the risks run by an iconic woman. Now, an iconic woman can be a runner, can be a rock star, can be a pop star, can be an actress, can be anything that are gorgeous. They're in the public eye, people know about them. They run all sorts of other risks that are not related to athletics at all. And I mean, the whole thing of stalking and gender-based violence and that sort of thing is very high on the minds of South Africans. And there is an element of that in the book, which again, we don't want to give it away, but Abby runs the risks, on-track risks, if you like, and off-track risks. And at the end of the day, Abby has to ask herself, is it all worth it? Is winning enough? And that's the payoff line.
Who was the tennis player that got stabbed courtside all those years ago?
Oh, yes. I know.
I want to say Steffi Graf.
Monica Seles.
Monica Seles.
Monica Seles. She got stabbed on the side of the court, and it ruined her life.
Correct. By a fan, supposedly. Correct. But you never know. So that being said, Ian, what do you want your readers to take away from the final lap is winning enough?
I'll tell you what I'd like. I'd like them to take several things away. Firstly, I want them to enjoy the story. It's a rock and roll story, and it goes, and people have told me.
Big book.
And it goes, and people have said that, it really, they didn't want to put it down, and I'm being genuine there. That's what I've had good feedback. So I want them to enjoy it. That's the first thing. It's a fun book. The second thing is I want them to learn a little bit about international track athletics, how it works, because it's pretty accurate what happens there. The whole training thing, the whole racing thing, the tactics, the media behind the scenes, the organization, the sponsorships. I want them to understand that and get a better insight. But I want them to understand that life is about making decisions. And it doesn't matter if you're a tennis player or a runner or an advocate or whatever you are. You have to, you're a dad with kids. You have to decide, are you doing what you're doing is the right thing? Is there more to life? Have I reached it? If I'm like, I turned 70 when I started writing this book, and I'm going, what am I going to do now? What am I going to do? And I said, well, I'm going to write a novel. It's like that, and it's it's sort of a wake up call for your life stage, if you like.
So is this what I have to look forward to in just a few weeks' time when I turn 70? I've got to sit down and say to my wife, oh, Ian says I've turned 70. I've got to write a novel.
Oh, David, well, happy birthday in a few weeks. I'm so impressed. Anyway, look, no, I mean, it's it's not so much about turning 70. It's life stages.
I know what you're saying. You just get to a point where you want to put it all together. That being said, going from sports broadcaster and TV producer to author, and having a wife who is a top class athlete, certainly South African, maybe not international. But did you at some particular point say, Sonia, do me a favor, just read the book and see if there are any factual errors, or if I could have tweaked it any different way? And if you did, what was her response?
That's a really funny question, because Sonia is Sonia. No, she's a wonderful person, and she read the first draft. Did you have to prefix it with "she's a wonderful person"? Because I think I know what's coming. Everybody knows that, and she read the first drafts, and I said, Sonia, what do you think? She said, oh, it's pretty good. I enjoyed it. It's nice. That was the thing.
Moving swiftly along type of thing.
No, well, in fact, oh goodness, she's I don't know, a little bit obsessive about certain things, and she came and whispered in my ear that she found 3 little mistakes in it, little typos. And I went, oh, please no, Sonia. Only Sonia would find typos in my book, I promise you.
Is this once it had been published?
Yes. The proofreader missed them. I mean, I don't want anybody to go hunting for these mistakes, because I didn't find them.
Fair enough. Now, with so many characters that you have to juxtapose and shift around and make sure they interact with each other, a lot of the authors that I've spoken to, they start off with a character who is a particular type, and then that character starts talking to them and eventually changes the writer's mind about how the character should evolve. Now, did this happen with any of yours? And if so, who was the most vocal of your characters?
That's a very interesting question, and I'm going to try and keep it short. The simple answer is yes, because I think that because I tried to create real people in the book, not sort of plastic people that weren't real. These were real people, so they do start talking to you. And I mean that in a kind of a metaphorical way at 2 o'clock in the morning. But they do get, I don't know if you can understand this, a kind of a life of their own.
Yeah.
And as they go, they start developing, and they start saying things and doing things that are a little bit unexpected, but it broadens them out. So the simple answer to that is, and I hope people can kind of get this in a way, that my characters became real to me, and they did start making decisions for themselves. And especially towards the end of the book, when we started planning the ending, which is important in a novel. Abby spoke to me about what she really wanted.
So did you then have to go and speak to your publisher and say to Tom, listen, this is how I'd like the book to end? And he went, I don't think so, Ian. That's not where I saw it going when you presented the original draft to me. And you go, well, Abby says this is how she wants it to end. And I can just imagine the conversation after that.
Well, no. Firstly, the conversation didn't happen with Tom, because Tom's the publisher, and I had a wonderful editor called Russell. wonderful editor called Russell Clark. And this, without Russell and Tom, this thing would never have happened. But anyway, so sorry, my phone is going. I should have switched it off. It just stopped. Anyway, so we debated the ending, and it wasn't with Tom, it was Russell, and he presented a couple of alternative endings, but I stuck with mine.
Fair enough. How disciplined a writer were you? And I've spoken to some authors who sit down and they write with not only a pen, they write with a fountain pen. So are you that type of writer, or are you that that you're so pedantic about what you write that you have to write it in a Word document so you can keep going back and changing this word and changing that word to make sure that each sentence that you produce is as perfect as you can get it, bar the 3 typos in the book?
The answer is absolutely yes. I was the latter. I think this thing never became a drag. It was fun. So if I could sit for 3-4 hours a day writing, it was lovely. It made my day. I enjoy it. But I write on the computer, I write on Microsoft Word, and I continually edit all the time. I go back and I back and I back. So I will rewrite a paragraph or a page or even a chapter several times. And so I enjoy doing that. And I just cannot imagine what Agatha Christie and I don't know, William Shakespeare did with a pen and ink. I could never have written like that. I'm not good enough.
Can you imagine what those original drafts looked like? Specifically, pardon me, with a bard, probably using a quill and ink, and all the words scratched out, and the oh damns and whatever other Shakespearean curses came out while he was trying to write that. But bringing it up to modern times, Ian, Athol Fugard writes with a fountain pen. He has a favorite pen, and that's the one he uses. So maybe for your next novel, hint, you'll give it a bash, or is there a next novel in the offing? Not necessarily a sequel, because sequels often don't work, and they only work if you've read the first book. But is there a different novel, maybe with a similar theme, that is playing in your head as we speak?
Okay, let me just firstly answer that double question. First is, I'll never write with a pen. Nobody could read my handwriting. That's the first thing. And it's way too slow and I couldn't edit it. But the whole sequel conversation has come up, and I really don't know. I just want to put this one to bed. I want to get it moving through the bookstores. I want to get it read. I want the print run to be used up. And then maybe, and I've obviously, I'd love to write another book. But maybe later this year I'll start something, and I'll have a chat with Tom, because you need a publisher. Yeah. And if you get to the end of the book, it doesn't have a natural sequel. It doesn't follow like a crime series where the same guy solves yet another murder and then yet another murder. It doesn't work like that. So we'll see. But God willing, I will do another book.
But you see, as I say, sequels don't always work, and sometimes authors get sucked into a situation where they're comfortable, and it becomes almost a template. The first book becomes a template for the next book. And there are authors that I read regularly, and I know within the first 10 pages there is going to be a fight, and that involves at least 6 antagonists, 3 of which are going to end up in hospital. And you wait for that to happen. It's the Jack Reacher series, and he fights in every single novel. And it's become, I don't know if and I can't think of the author's name now. I don't know if he's using it as a device because people are expecting it, but sort of 8, 9, 10 novels in, come on, lose a fight once or twice,
David, that's such an interesting discussion, because, I mean, funnily enough, I've read every single Jack Reacher book until recently, when they became very sort of formulaic. And but I mean, he's one of the best-selling authors in the world. So guess what? It works. But so I agree with that. But if you read Daniel Silva, now, David, go and read Daniel Silva. Now, that guy is way better writer than Lee Child is. But I think Daniel Silva, it's the same characters doing the same things, but in different places, different times. But you've got to be very careful not to become boring, repetitive, and then slapdash. Honestly, and I mean that sincerely, because your publisher says you've got another 3 weeks to write a book, and you bang it out and it's not any good. So
Yeah, there's what I used to term the 5-minute man in movies. When the director gets to a particular point in a movie and he has no idea how he's going to finish it up, then he calls in the 5-minute man who writes the last 5 minutes of the movie that may or may not bear any resemblance to the rest of the hour and 40 that you've watched. But it just wraps everything up and they can go to the end and everybody gets paid and they all go about their merry way, leaving an audience really peeved at the end of the day.
So yeah, so I mean, my favorite authors are people that written sequels, like Jonathan Kellerman with the Alex Delaware series.
Oh,
and,
don't start me on the
Kathy Wright.
Kellerman family, because I used to go to the Santon Library when I still lived in that area. And if there was a Kellerman on the shelf, even if I'd read it, Ian, I would take it out just so somebody else couldn't. I really, really liked it. I liked both Jonathan and Faye. I'm not so mad about the son's writing. I don't think he's quite as good as his parents. But Jonathan and Faye, yes, please, any day of the week. But let's get back to Ian Laxton. We're not here to discuss other authors and their books. Did you, as an author, Ian, and as a first author with this particular novel, did either you, your publisher, your editor, or the characters say the end? If you get my drift.
Yes.
Did it get to a point where you could say, you could type the end and push send to send it off to your editor one last time?
Well, eventually, obviously, that happened, but it was this, you know, for a first novel, it's really quite a journey, and it's a steep learning curve, because Russell Clark, my editor, essentially what he said to me is cut, you've got too much, cut it down, because I enjoyed writing. I mean, there was a chapter I wrote about the Kruger Park, and he goes, Ian, what on earth has this got to do with the Kruger Park? And I go, well, I like the Kruger Park, I want to write about it. He says, take it out. So can I just
stop you there? And yeah. I'll tell you why. Because I had to write something this weekend, a very short deadline piece, and I wrote it, and there was a point in the story, because it was a story about a picture that I had to send off to somebody. There was a paragraph, exactly what you just said, and I read the whole story again, and I looked at this paragraph, and what you've just said, because you spoke about this at your book launch, resonated in my head. And I go, why did you put that paragraph there, David? It bears no resemblance to what you've written prior, and it bears no resemblance to what you've written afterwards. Take it out. Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Russell.
Yes. So I think the bottom line here is that eventually you get to a point where you have to say, as a team, this is done. This is it. Finish and clear. Thank you very much. Send it off to the proofreader. Yeah.
And then after you'd sent it off, being the type of pedantic writer you are, were there lots of phone calls to Russell going, please, can I just change page 63? It doesn't work for me. And he's going, I'm sorry, who are you? And why are you calling me?
The simple answer is no. It was done and dusted. It had to be.
Okay. And then how did you feel? You know, women have postpartum blues sometimes after the birth of a baby. Long distance runners, specifically ultra marathon runners, they finish at Comrades, they've been training for 6 months. Now all of a sudden the race is over, good, bad, or indifferent, and now they have nothing to look forward to. You were really, really busy for a long period of time, and then all of a sudden you wake up the morning after you've sent it off, turn to Sonia and go, so what do I do now?
No, David, it wasn't like that. For me, the thing was getting done and dusted. I explained that. It was finished and clear. Then you went into production, so it was, and then of course you had all the fun things like designing covers and fonts and typesetting and all that stuff. But for me, the best part was when the delivery truck arrived. And they gave me 300 books for my garage, and I took one out and I held it in my hand. That was not postpartum depression. That was postpartum happiness, I promise you.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Ian, the book I know is available in bookstores because I'm holding a copy in my hand. It's published by Guidebook Publications. Is it available, as they used to say, at all good bookstores, as well as on, can you get it for Kindle and all of the ebook platforms?
Okay, I'll answer that because people need to know that, and I'll get asked that a lot. It's a very slow process because a new author, a South African author, is, you've got to beat the doors down to get it onto the shelves. We've got a book distributor which you have to have
Right.
locally, and it's creeping into the bookstores. It's in a few exclusive books. And I think it's going to get more and more, but it's certainly not standing on the front shelf as you walk past at the airport. I looked when I came home after the book launch. So it's going to take time. But for just to kill the Amazon thing quickly, Tom has managed to get it onto Amazon. It's a process. I don't know if it's there yet, the ebook, so don't go looking for it yet, but keep looking. But I think if you want to get it, go to runnersguide.co.za, runnersguide.co.za. That's Tom Cottrell's website. You can buy it online there, but go and ask exclusive books. Say, hey, where's Ian Laxton's Final Lap book? Get it.
And put it on the front shelf, cover facing, not spine forward.
It's actually not really there yet. I mean, Andre de Ruyter book has apparently sold like 100,000 copies in 2 hours or something. I wish I could do that, but anyway, depends what people want to read. But it's coming. But runnersguide.co.za. You can buy it online.
Great stuff. My guest today on In Conversation With has been Ian Laxton. The book is called The Final Lap Is Winning Enough. It's published by Guidebook Publications. Ian, thank you so very much for chatting to me. It's been absolutely awesome. No bad words were exchanged, and Topper Polly shorts will remain certainly with me for the longest time. You have a wonderful day. And once again, thanks for being my guest on In Conversation With.
David, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Cheers.
Cheers.